My name is Maribel, and before you decide what to believe about me, understand this. I am not speaking from imagination, superstition, or rumor. I am speaking from memory. There are moments in life that split you in two, the person you were before and the one who survives afterward. This story begins in the quiet spaces, the places where nothing seems wrong, where ordinary objects sit harmlessly in plain sight. Salt was one of those objects for me, common, innocent, trusted. I grew up believing it was pure, protective, almost sacred in its simplicity. That belief followed me into adulthood, into choices I didn't realize were reshaping the air around me. At first, nothing felt dangerous. My home looked like any other, soft lighting, familiar corners, silence that felt earned. But silence can be deceptive. It can hide a tension so thin you don't notice it tightening until you move. I had begun paying attention to things most people ignore. How a room feels when you step into it, how shadows behave when the light hasn't changed, how your body reacts before your mind catches up. I told myself I was becoming aware. In truth, I was becoming open. Salt entered my life as a tool, not a symbol. I didn't question it. I didn't research deeply enough. I trusted fragments of knowledge passed hand to hand, whispered as wisdom. I thought intention was enough. I thought belief gave me control. What I didn't understand was that some materials don't wait for intention. They respond to placement. They respond to proximity. They respond to repetition. And salt, once you know what it listens for, is never neutral. There were nights when I would sit alone and feel as if the house itself was leaning inward, listening with me. The walls felt closer than they should have been. The air carried a density that had weight, as though something unseen had settled and refused to leave. I dismissed it at first. Everyone does. We explain away discomfort because the alternative feels dramatic, embarrassing, irrational. I told myself I was tired. I told myself awareness comes with unease. I did not yet know the difference between awakening and exposure. I began noticing patterns, subtle ones, sleep that didn't restore me, thoughts that didn't feel fully my own, a sense of being observed without fear, which was somehow worse. Fear warns you. Familiarity disarms you. Whatever had begun to stir in my space did not arrive violently. It arrived patiently. It waited for me to normalize its presence. That is how doors open, not with force, but with permission disguised as habit. The most unsettling part was how ordinary everything remained. The floor didn't creak. The lights didn't flicker. Friends who visited never sensed anything wrong. It was personal, intimate, directed. I was the common denominator. My home reflected what I had unknowingly arranged within it. I had altered the balance without realizing balance existed. Once shifted, it does not announce itself. It reveals itself slowly, through discomfort you can't quite name. I share this now, not as a warning yet, but as a beginning. Because before there are rules, there is always a moment of ignorance that feels safe. Before consequences, there is confidence. And before anyone listens, there must be a voice willing to remember exactly how it all started. I truly believed I was doing everything right, and that belief made me careless in ways I didn't recognize at the time. Safety, to me, meant control, knowing what to use, where to place it, how to repeat it until it felt routine. I had convinced myself that protection was something you could build quietly, piece by piece, without consequence. I remember how calm I felt the first time I handled salt with purpose instead of habit. It wasn't just seasoning anymore. It was intention made physical. I told myself I was grounding my space, cleansing it, reinforcing boundaries that already existed. That confidence was intoxicating. It made me feel wiser than I was, steadier than I truly felt. I began to rely on the act itself rather than questioning the effect, and repetition turned into reassurance. Each time I placed it, I felt a brief sense of relief, as though I had checked a lock or closed a window. What I didn't understand was that safety built on assumption is fragile, and anything fragile can be exploited. My home started to feel different, but not in a way that alarmed me. It felt quieter, heavier, more contained, like the outside world had been muted. I interpreted that as peace. I mistook stillness for protection. I didn't notice how my instincts were slowly dulling, how my body stopped reacting to subtle warnings because I kept overriding them with logic. I told myself discomfort was part of adjustment, that growth always felt strange before it felt right. I was proud of how composed I seemed, how disciplined. I ignored the way certain corners of the room felt colder, or how I avoided sitting in specific spots without knowing why. I ignored the way I hesitated before stepping into my bedroom at night, pausing just long enough to feel foolish for pausing at all. The truth is, I wanted to feel safe so badly that I accepted the illusion of it without inspection. I didn't ask who benefits when you stop asking questions. I didn't ask what listens when you repeat an act with belief, but without understanding. I had reduced protection to a ritual without wisdom, and rituals without wisdom do not protect, they announce. I was building something, yes, but not a shield. I was shaping an environment that responded to me in ways I hadn't anticipated. The house was changing because I was changing it, and every time I told myself I was safe, I was teaching myself not to notice when I wasn't. The first time I placed salt along my bedroom windowsill, I thought I was being careful. I thought I was doing something sensible, even protective. The window faced the street, a place where the night air slipped in unnoticed, and I imagined the salt acting as a silent barrier, keeping out anything that wasn't welcome. I had read somewhere that salt could repel negativity, that it could absorb the energy that might seep through cracks in walls or glass. I took that idea literally, sprinkling a thin line of white crystals along the edge where the window met the sill. It looked harmless, neat even, a simple gesture of safeguarding. But what I didn't know was that windows are more than openings to the outside. They are thresholds. They are portals of exchange, not walls. And salt, when placed there, doesn't simply defend. It calls attention to what is already lingering nearby. The first nights were subtle. My sleep, which had always been a refuge, began to feel strange. Dreams came sharper, too detailed, too immediate, like someone had turned the volume up on the subconscious. Faces I didn't recognize stared longer than they should have. Sounds of my house, creaks, taps, whispers of wind seemed to stretch into new shapes, forming patterns I couldn't name. I told myself it was stress, that perhaps I had been too immersed in my own thoughts during the day. But the unease grew, a quiet pressure in the air near the window, so faint that it almost fooled me into thinking I was imagining it. One night I woke to the sensation of being observed. The room was dark, but I could feel the weight of eyes, not human eyes, focused on me. My first instinct was disbelief, and then denial. I tried to rationalize it, the street lights, shadows cast by trees, the way my cat moves across the room in the dark. Nothing explained the sense of insistence, the attention that did not waver even when I shifted under the covers. I got out of bed and approached the window. The salt sparkled faintly in the moonlight, pure and ordinary, like nothing could be threatening about it. And yet I had to step back. I had placed it there, thinking it would protect me, and instead I had marked a spot, a line that invited something I hadn't prepared for. Over the next few nights, the dreams intensified. Faces appeared in the corners of my vision, figures that vanished when I blinked, voices that teased the edge of comprehension. I began sleeping lightly, waking at odd hours, sensing movement in the room when none could be detected. The salt had turned from shield to signal. It had amplified the energy around the window instead of suppressing it, acting like a beacon to anything that was patient enough to notice. I realized then that intention without knowledge is reckless. I had assumed safety, and in that assumption, I had opened a doorway, however small, and I had walked past it unaware. I thought I understood thresholds, or at least I thought I did. After the unsettling nights near the window, I convinced myself that I had learned my lesson. I was careful, attentive, cautious, until I reached the doorway. Doorways are deceptive. They look like simple frames, passages from one space to another, but they are far more than that. They are markers, silent agreements between what is inside and what is outside, lines that separate worlds without closing them entirely. I placed salt across my main doorway, thinking I was sealing it, thinking I was creating a barrier against intrusion. I believed that the line of white grains would stop anything harmful from crossing into my home. I thought I was clever. I thought I was safe. I was wrong. From the moment the salt touched the floor, the atmosphere of the house shifted. At first it was subtle, small, almost unnoticeable differences. The air felt heavier, denser, as if it were waiting. The quiet had changed. My home no longer hummed with neutral life. It held a tension I could not name. Footsteps echoed differently. Shadows lingered longer than light allowed. And then came the sounds, faint, soft at first, like a whisper carried just beyond comprehension. I tried to rationalize them, telling myself it was the house settling, the pipes, the wind. But rationality failed me because this was not sound in the ordinary sense. This was attention. Something had noticed the line I had drawn, and it had responded. I began to notice movement in peripheral vision, subtle, fluid, purposeful. Objects seemed to shift ever so slightly when I wasn't looking directly at them. Doors I had closed properly would be ajar when I returned. My cat, usually indifferent to shadows, would hiss and arch its back, staring into spaces I could not see. And every time I passed the doorway, I felt it, pressure, presence, an almost imperceptible pull, as if crossing the line was acknowledged, recorded, and remembered. The salt, which I thought was protective, had instead become a marker of permission. It defined access rather than blocking it. Sleep became a battlefield. I lay in my bed aware that the doorway was not just a piece of wood and paint. It had become a gateway, and the salt I had trusted as a shield was the reason it had opened. The night sounds grew sharper, whispers shaped into patterns that almost resembled words. I could feel a weight pressing down, gentle but insistent, like water pooling at my chest. The doorway no longer led simply to another room. It led somewhere I was not meant to go. I felt eyes watching, waiting, evaluating, and worse, I felt that my home, my sanctuary, had begun to accept it. I tried to remove the salt immediately, to undo the mistake before it became something permanent. But the line had already been drawn, and the response had already begun. Thresholds, I realized, are alive in ways you cannot control once you interfere. They remember what you mark. They react to the way you mark it. And sometimes, once something crosses that line, it lingers far longer than you ever expected. I had assumed that protection was a matter of placement, a matter of intention, But intention alone is not enough. Doorways are agreements, and I had unknowingly signed one with hands that were not mine. I thought I had learned my lesson after the doorway, after the nights of restless sleep and whispers in the dark, but I had not. Ignorance, I realized, has a way of dressing itself as courage. I kept a small bowl of salt under my bed, tucked neatly in a corner where it seemed invisible, where it felt safe. I convinced myself that it was harmless there, that it would absorb any lingering negativity that the doorway or the window had failed to catch. I imagined it as a silent guardian, working while I slept, keeping my body, my spirit, my very self untouched. But bodies, I discovered, are not separate from the spaces they occupy. They are intimately entangled with every vibration, every energy that passes through a home. The salt beneath my bed did not protect me, it anchored me. The first night was uneventful, almost reassuring. I fell asleep with the soft glow of my bedside lamp casting familiar shadows, the salt hidden beneath my mattress. But by the third night, subtle changes began. Sleep became heavier, deeper, yet somehow more suffocating. I felt pressure on my chest, an invisible weight that made it hard to breathe, as if someone or something was leaning down into me, observing from beneath. I woke in the middle of the night with my heart hammering, unsure whether it was a dream or a presence that refused to leave. The boundaries I had relied on had shifted. The salt was no longer passive, it was active. It was responding to my energy, my fear, my fatigue, and it was transmitting it into the space around me. Then came the sleep paralysis. The first time I could not move despite trying with every ounce of willpower. I could feel pressure on my chest, a coldness in the air pressing into my skin, and a whispering at the edges of my perception. Not voices in words, but a language made of vibration and intent, probing, testing. I could not escape, could not call out, could not even open my eyes fully. The salt under the bed had created a conduit. It had anchored a door that should have remained closed, a door that connected me directly to something patient, intelligent, and aware. Even during the day, I felt its influence. I would sit at my desk or make tea in the kitchen and catch myself hesitating before walking across the room where the salt remained hidden. Shadows seemed to bend toward me, and I noticed that the usual comfort of home, the walls, the floorboards, the familiar scent of furniture and air felt off, charged with expectation. Every movement felt observed. I could not deny it anymore. The salt beneath my bed had changed the way my body experienced the house, the way my presence interacted with it. It was no longer a physical object. It had become a living marker, and I was tethered to it in ways I could not fully comprehend. By the end of that week, my sense of reality had begun to fracture. Sleep was terrifying. Waking moments were hollowed with unease, and the once familiar walls now seemed to pulse with awareness. I had thought I was creating safety, but what I had actually done was bind myself to the energy I did not understand, to the response that had been quietly waiting for me all along. The salt, innocuous and ordinary to anyone else, had become the center of my vulnerability, and I was trapped by my own assumption that placing it under my bed could only help. I had learned too late that this is one of those things no one warns you about. The places you think are harmless are often the most dangerous of all. Leaving that life, that practice, that sense of control I once believed I had, was nothing like stepping out of a room or shutting a door. It was a slow, trembling undoing, a painstaking dismantling of layers I had built over years. Every step I took away from what I had summoned or attracted was met with resistance, not in the form of screams or visible apparitions, but through subtle, insistent reminders that the choice I had made was not easily reversed. I had opened doors I did not understand, and closing them required more than physical action. It demanded attention, reckoning, and courage I didn't know I possessed. I started by removing the salt from every threshold, every corner, every place where I had thought protection resided. Each crystal I picked up felt heavier than it should, as if it had absorbed not just dust and moisture, but awareness, memory, energy. It wasn't just cleaning. It was an act of unweaving a web I had entangled myself in. The house itself seemed to notice the change. Rooms that had felt tight and listening began to expand, to breathe again. Yet the relief was never immediate. Presence lingers. Shadows that had clung to walls or corners did not vanish the moment the salt was gone. They retreated slowly, hesitantly, as if reluctant to acknowledge that the invitation had been withdrawn. I realized that leaving behind what I had opened required more than simple removal. It required reclamation. I had to reclaim my sense of self, my confidence, my authority over the space I inhabited. Every night, as I moved through the rooms, I spoke aloud, quietly, affirming that this space belonged to me again. I didn't know if words mattered, but silence had proven dangerous. I began to notice small victories first. The way my breath settled naturally when I walked into a previously tense room. The way light filled corners without distortion. The way my own reflection stopped feeling like someone else's shadow was pressing close behind me. These were subtle signs, almost imperceptible, but each one reinforced that progress was possible. I learned to respect boundaries, my own and the unseen ones I had ignored. I relearned how to move through the house without demanding, without assuming, without leaving lines for something unknown to follow. There were moments of panic, of course. The house sometimes whispered again, shadows still hesitated longer than they should, and the occasional fleeting sensation of eyes on me reminded me that some doors do not close quickly, or at least not entirely. I had to let go of fear as much as I had to remove the salt. Fear is what feeds attention, and attention, I learned, is the doorway's companion. I meditated, I cleansed, I purged, not just physically but spiritually, though I didn't yet have the language to describe what that meant fully. It was trial, error, patience, and intuition working together, forcing me to confront the consequences of curiosity and action without understanding. Walking away from what I had opened taught me that there is no instant redemption. There is only step-by-step reclamation, a painstaking restoration of the boundaries you thought you understood. I was left to face the truth of my own naivety, to reconcile with the fact that my hands had marked places that should have remained untouched, and that some of the responses I had awakened would linger long after I had made peace with myself. Every decision moving forward carried a weight of awareness I had never felt before, a constant reminder that what is opened, even inadvertently, does not vanish quietly. I am telling you this now because silence carries a weight that grows heavier the longer it is held. I kept these truths to myself for years, convinced that speaking them aloud would make them real in a way I could no longer control, that words could summon consequences I was not ready to face again. But the reality I endured does not belong to me alone. Ignorance is not innocence, and curiosity without guidance is an invitation. I am telling you because the ordinary things you trust, the line of salt on a windowsill, the grains scattered under a bed, the thin barrier across a doorway, are far more potent than they appear. They are not neutral. They are conduits, amplifiers, magnets for attention you do not intend to give. Every home remembers what enters, every corner echoes what is left behind, every threshold listens. I am telling you because I wish someone had warned me, not in vague phrases or comforting folklore, but in unflinching honesty. I wish someone had drawn the lines for me, spoken the rules that are invisible yet enforceable, shown me how what seems protective can be the very thing that undoes you. I am telling you because what I faced, what I survived, is a map of consequence, a map I cannot erase, but one I can hand to those willing to see. The salt that I thought was defense became a mirror, reflecting back my own ignorance, my own assumptions, my own unexamined courage. It revealed that safety is never about intention alone. It is about understanding. It is about respect. It is about knowing the delicate difference between protection and provocation. I am telling you because energy is not passive, it does not sleep, it does not forget, and it does not wait silently while you think yourself clever. It responds, it records, it marks, it moves through the cracks you cannot see, following the lines you cannot feel until it is too late to deny its presence. I have watched it bend around boundaries I had thought secure, slip past rituals I had trusted, and imprint itself on spaces I had once called mine. I have lived with the consequences of misplacement and misjudgment, and I know the patience it takes to reclaim what has been touched, the vigilance required to walk without leaving invitations in your wake. I am telling you because curiosity will always tempt you. It will whisper promises of insight, of knowledge, of power. And if you do not respect the subtle rules, the quiet thresholds, the spaces that are more than they seem, you will awaken what is waiting with a precision that surprises even the prepared. Doors can open silently. Shadows can linger patiently. The ordinary can become extraordinary in its capacity to mark, to tether, to summon. I am telling you because knowing the truth, the unvarnished, unforgiving truth, changes the way you move through your home, through your life, through your own choices. Awareness is not optional. Complacency is dangerous. I am telling you because this is not a story of superstition. It is a story of consequence, of cause and effect, of small actions with enormous weight. It is a warning wrapped in memory, a lesson carved from experience, a guide to understanding that some protections are not what they seem, and some habits, though familiar, are invitations in disguise. I am telling you because the line between what you protect and what you expose is thinner than you imagine. And once it is crossed, the repercussions do not wait, they follow. I am telling you this because you must choose what to do with the knowledge I have laid bare. You must confront what you have already ignored in your own spaces, the places you have treated as neutral, the thresholds you have taken for granted. The question is not mine to answer anymore. The question now belongs to you. How will you move through your own home, through your own life, knowing what is invisible, knowing what listens, knowing what doors you may already have opened without realizing it?